Next item on our agenda is a presentation. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Rebecca Fleury, our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I appreciate that. I am going to welcome to the podium Mallory Avis. She is our transit director. She's going to talk. There's been a lot of talk this week, particularly with the agenda item on the Calhoun County's agenda for Thursday about countywide transportation and how we got there and next, and potential next steps. So Mallory, I'm going to turn it to you.
Thank you. Good to see you all again. I'm Mallory Avis. I'm the transit director for the city. And so for the next minute, I just want to take you through kind of the path that we've walked down to get to this point in what the county's resolution on their agenda is, what it means for us, and then how the city of Battle Creek has played a role in that. So next slide, please. So I came to the city in 2019. When I came, this was already ongoing. It was a study funded by the Michigan Department of Transportation, undertaken by Calhoun County as a result of stakeholders and community members identifying that transportation is a need within Calhoun County. And so this consultant was hired to identify what a path forward might look like for a Calhoun County Transit Authority, and then what the feasibility of that is. So the consultant identified a timeline for implementation. And of course, COVID struck literally right after that report was finalized. So that report was finalized in March, I believe, or May of 2020. And so that slowed down the implementation timeline that we had. From there, there was a steering committee, essentially made up of leaders from around the county, city government, local government, and county government, that have all been working together to continue that work throughout the pandemic into now. And so from there, we've been identifying scopes of work, timelines, service scenarios, roles and responsibilities that each different municipality plays, and things like drafting letters, similar to what you guys received, identifying the formation of the authority. And then lastly is the action that is expected this week from the county to take the legal action to create the authority under Public Act 196. Next slide, please. So why is public transportation so important in Calhoun County? That's because our demographics are far different from our neighboring counties. We are one of the only counties in the area that do not have countywide transportation, but we also have very different statistics from our surrounding communities and the national averages as a whole. For example, 69% of our population is under 150% of the federal poverty line. The national average for that number is 25%. We have more people living in poverty in Calhoun County than other places around the country. We have 6% more seniors. That means 16% of our population is seniors. We have 14% of our population is individuals with disabilities, which is 2% higher than the national average. And then 45% of households in Calhoun County have one vehicle or less in their household. This means a significant number of people don't have access to private transportation and either rely on other people for rides, or they don't take those trips that they would otherwise take if they had access. That study identified 26,000 unmet trips per year. So an unmet need of 26,000 trips per year. That is before the announcement of any development like Blue Oval. And if we estimate that only 2% of people that would be employed there need transportation, that doubles that number. That's another 26,000 trips per year that would be needed. Next slide, please. So the city of Battle Creek applied for a grant from the Michigan Department of Transportation to demonstrate the feasibility of on-demand countywide transportation. We call that BC Go. I've presented to you guys before about BC Go. You've likely seen the little black minivans running around town. And so if you want to go to the next slide, I'll share with you some statistics about the success of BC Go. We started this with the grant application being a coordinated mobility pilot, meaning we want to demonstrate how we can coordinate, not duplicate, services around the county. How can we utilize other agencies' assets, technologies? How can we create efficiencies among multiple providers to meet the needs that we're all currently siloed operating within? We cover 718 square miles using only 2 fully accessible minivans. So when I share the next numbers with you, that's not going to be surprising. We have 3,655 registered users for BC Go. That's unique accounts in BC Go. and we're averaging about 160 additional users registering every month. We've had over 78,000 trip requests. We didn't start operating until March 8th of 2021, so even in the middle of the pandemic, launching during a pandemic, we've had over 78,000 trip requests. We've only provided just over 16,200 rides. That means we're only meeting 22% of the demand for transportation with the 2 vehicles that we currently have in this pilot. We've had 17,600 passengers, and so what this shows is that we're able to demonstrate efficiency. So 16,000 trips, 17,000 passengers, we're matching people going in the same direction as like a rideshare. And then 750 mobility-assisted trips. That's individuals traveling around the county in wheelchairs or mobility devices that would otherwise limit their availability of services. When we launched this, we weren't sure what the adoption of technology would look like, and we were surprised that 70% of our users use the app to book their rides and manage their trips. This gives people the independence to not have to call a phone number. However, the phone number is still available. Our dispatch office is still available for people to be able to call and book a ride that way. 60% of our users are paying online. So when they book their ride, they can pay with either a mobile wallet or another form of electronic payment linked to their account. This requires them to not have to have cash when they board or have exact change. Next slide, please. Our trip purpose indicator tells us that employment is the #1 reason people are using BC Go. They're using it to get to work. The second most common trip is healthcare. So again, keep in mind that this is county-wide. People are accessing employment, healthcare, and education around the county. The next most frequent trip is social services. These are things like appointments with DHHS, Social Security offices, Secretary of State, things like that. And then lastly is shopping and recreation. And while we might think about those things as being optional trips, those truly contribute to somebody's quality of life and independence and their ability to age in place. Next slide, please. If we drill in specifically to Battle Creek's statistics, we make up 64% of those trip requests on BC Go. So we've had over 50,000 trip requests just originating or having a destination within the city of Battle Creek. That, keep in mind, is only on BC Go. That doesn't include the 380,000 fixed route trips that we provide every year or the 23,000 teletransit trips we provide every year in the city of Battle Creek. The most prominent locations speak to the slide before. That's your high-density housing, employment locations, and healthcare locations. The last one I'll point out is the Intermodal Transportation Center, and that's our ITC or our Amtrak and Greyhound station. That indicates that people are using BC Go for regional connectivity. So people are using BC Go to connect to another form of transportation and complete their trip. Next slide, please. We launched a survey last year to understand how people are using BC Go, why they're using BC Go, and so we asked the question, what 3 problems does BC Go address for you? 2 of those 3 responses centered around private vehicle ownership. Either they didn't own a car, didn't have access to a car, or affording a car was out of the question. So the top 2 responses were related to that. The third one was the stress of the commute. And so something to think about when we think about the stress of the commute and what that means is there's a lot of emotional and cognitive labor that goes into planning a trip. And when you or I can jump into a private vehicle and make that trip, we don't have to do a lot of planning about it. But somebody who needs to rely on another person for a ride or arrange in advance a special neighbor or friend or family member to get them somewhere and then figure out how to get back home, there's a lot of emotional labor with that. And so the stress of the commute was number 3. And then lastly, we left it open for comment as well. Those comments all center around independence and not having to rely on other people. So for example, I now have an option to get out since I've been in a wheelchair. These are things that people didn't have access to before, and now they do with BC Go. Next slide, please. So our goal here with the countywide authority idea is that we are creating one comprehensive system. And why comprehensive? As I mentioned before, currently there's, at the time of the study, there were 17 transportation providers in Calhoun County. That included taxis, which no longer exist, that includes non-emergency medical transportation, which is limited to individuals who are going to or from medical appointments and is typically paid for by insurance. That also includes our other public providers that are siloed within their areas of operations, such as Community Action Agency, which serves seniors and individuals with disabilities. And then there's Community Inclusive Recreation, who serves individuals with disabilities. And then there's other public providers that are siloed within solely their program purposes. So a comprehensive system is the idea that we can connect the entire county utilizing all of these services together, operating as essentially one coordinated system and utilizing everybody's assets to the fullest. It makes more sense because we can all organize, have consistent fare structures, ride structures, fair payment systems, hopefully, and then make things easier for the rider to understand how they can get to or from places. Next slide, please. So the steering committee that I was talking about, made of leaders throughout the county, we developed some service scenarios, and these are just examples of what service could look like. I preface that because ultimately the authority board would determine what service looks like. The authority board would be the one who would decide days and hours of service, what fare structure looks like. If the authority board said we want to operate 24/7, 365, and we want it to be free, obviously that would impact what I'm about to present to you looks like. But so in the meantime, we just needed a jumping off point. We needed to understand what a budget could look like, what a service level could look like, and so we put together some examples. I called them the good, better, and best scenarios, so we'll start with the good. So the good scenario basically takes what exists today, which we know doesn't necessarily meet the needs of the community. It takes our existing city services, both demand response and fixed route, and just adds countywide service to it. In total, you see that there's 10 demand response vehicles, and demand response means the minivans or short buses, door to door, the more flexible buses, not big fixed route 40-foot buses. On the better scenario, we take that, we up the good scenario and extend service from Monday through Friday from 5 a.m. until midnight, includes Saturday service, and then, can you go to the next slide? Sorry. We include Saturday service until midnight. Note there's still no Sunday service. Countywide, now the vehicles go up to 12 demand response vehicles, 6 in the city, 6 countywide. Again, just examples that we were using to kind of be able to put a picture to what an authority could look like. This scenario does extend fixed route hours, for example, from currently ending at 6:45 to taking it till 9:15, meeting demands of, again, workforce employment. Next slide, please. And then if we look at the best scenario, again, this is just an idea from what we hear from our riders and our community, that this takes the same better scenario, but adds Sunday service to it. So now we have midnight service until all the way through Saturday. We have Sunday service that goes until 6 p.m. And then now we have 13 vehicles, demand response, operating throughout the county. So next slide, please. So now, again, the cost. We used those service scenarios based on feedback and surveys and applied assumptions of state and federal operating levels, existing operating expenses from 2019, which was the last year that we operated a full level of service, and we applied that to each of those scenarios based on operating hours. So if you could go to the next slide. Those assumptions assume the same existing level of federal funding, the same existing level of state funding. It assumes the same level of fare box recovery, which is the fares collected by passengers, and then applies it to each of those service hours. So you'll see in that best scenario, you're looking at roughly a $10 million budget to operate a system that size. Now, again, you have the federal and state operating assistance, you have fare box. The difference there is about $4.5 million, and so that is the amount of local funding that would be needed to essentially support that level of service. Again, the authority board would determine what level of service that was, what that fare box revenue goal was, things like that. But so as an example, at the time that we put this together, assuming full countywide tax base, that was roughly 1.2 mils. Next slide, please. So now we get to the point of next steps. And that is where we're at today and this week. Next slide, please. So at this point, we would be less than 18 months away from a potential millage that would support a transportation system. We would be looking at August of 2024, and that millage would be presented to voters in the area of the jurisdiction of the transit authority. So now we're in that opt-in, opt-out period. Once the county forms the authority, jurisdictions have 30 days to decide to opt out. So what does it mean to opt in or opt out? Opting out means that the millage would not be proposed to those communities, and those communities would not be part of the service boundaries of the authority. Opting in means that the millage would be presented to voters in those jurisdictions, and that jurisdiction would be part of the authority boundaries, or part of the service area for the transportation authority. From there, once the authority is formed, a transition manager or a consultant would need to kind of lead the efforts to manage the transition of individuals, policies, leases, agreements, contracts, all of that kind of stuff that would need to be in place probably by the end of this calendar year. And then from there, the authority board would have to start meeting immediately after formation of the authority. And that authority board would be comprised of individuals selected by their representative jurisdictions, and those jurisdictions being those that opt in to the authority. So that authority board, again, would be responsible for determining what the level of service is, what the fare structure looks like, what the vehicle types look like, essentially all decisions about the authority's operations. And then lastly is a community outreach and education. And that's what I'm here today, is to answer any questions you might have and any concerns that you have. That's all.
Mallory, we say thank you very much. We're going to take the opportunity to talk about that further under Resolution 131
Sounds great.
when we get ready to vote on this.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 131. Madam Clerk, when you're ready.
Effective July 10, 1986, the Michigan Legislature passed the Public Transportation Authority Act, Public Act 198 of 1986. This act authorized the formation of public transportation authorities with certain general powers and duties. This type of public authority possesses all the powers necessary to carry out the purposes of its formation and all things incident to carrying out the purposes of its formation. Once established, it is administered in the manner determined by the board and is provided in its articles of incorporation. It may enter into a contract to employ a management firm, either corporate or otherwise, to operate the public transportation system under the supervision of the public authority. The act also sets out how certain local entities could withdraw from public transportation authorities. If the articles of incorporation are authorized by the Calhoun County Board of Commissioners on May 4, 2023, then the deadline for the City of Battle Creek to withdraw unconditionally from the newly formed Public Transportation Authority is June 5, 2023. There is also a method to withdraw later than that date. However, it would require a 2/3 vote by the TACC or by a vote of the electors. Battle Creek City Ordinance 212.02, Section 9 provides that the mayor or any commissioner may request that an ordinance or resolution be prepared by either the city manager or the city attorney, and that it be placed on the agenda for consideration by the commission in accordance with these rules. It further provides that the request must be in writing and co-sponsored in writing by at least 2 additional city commission members to best ensure the judicious use of staff time and efforts. Upon receipt of such request, the city attorney or city manager shall place the resolution on the agenda on the date requested. At-large Commissioner Jake Smith submitted the request for this resolution, which was co-sponsored by Ward 1 Commissioner Roger Ballard and Ward 4 Commissioner Chris Simmons. This resolution seeks to opt out of a county-wide public transportation authority.
I move for the approval of Resolution 131.
Support.
Been moved and supported to approve Resolution 131. Mallory, I'm going to ask you to come over here in case there are questions. If there are no questions, you're free to go back over there. But are there any comments? Jake Smith, Commissioner Jake Smith will start out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I make my comments, I had sent some questions over beforehand so we could have them answered, and if it's okay, can we answer those to the entire group? There's only like 5 of them regarding.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Do you have those questions, or I can pull them up on my cell phone?
Oh, no, I don't have them in front of me,
Yeah.
sorry.
That'll probably answer the questions we want.
Okay. So your first question is, will this authority serve within the city limits as well as out, right? So essentially that question asks, what are the boundaries of the authority going to be? And that is determined by what jurisdictions opt in and what jurisdictions opt out. So the authority, if we have, the primary cities and a handful of townships within the county that opt in, then that's where the service would operate. Anywhere that opts out, the service would not operate.
The county service, right?
Correct. Well,
The new potential service, right?
so,
We're not getting rid of BC Transit by voting one way or another on this, I guess.
potentially. So.
I guess we are, yeah.
Yes. So if the commission were to opt out, that's kind of a complicated question, right? So if the city were to opt out of service or out of the authority, and the county went ahead with the creation of the authority, the county would become, that authority, not the county, the authority would become the provider of transportation. And so if the city opted out, and the authority has people who have opted in, which we already know that there are communities who have opted in, the authority would now provide service to those communities, and the provider of service is who the designated recipient is of state and federal funding. So state and federal funding would go to the authority to operate service, and if the city of Battle Creek were not part of that service area, then that could impact what the city of Battle Creek's level of service looks like.
Sure, but we would still maintain our existing funding and our existing resources, having opted out of the
No.
TAC.
Not necessarily, no. The TAC would become the operator of transportation in the county. And so our federal funding and our state funding that we currently get as a city would go to the authority.
Oh, okay.
Because they would become the designated recipient. They would be the provider of transportation.
So we wouldn't get the money.
Correct, correct.
Okay. I had a few more, too.
Yes, yes.
Sorry.
The second question is, will this authority require a millage of any amount? And that answer is most likely yes. There's going to be some level of local funding required. So like I shared in the presentation, if we use a $10 million estimate, assuming state and federal funding levels stay the same, that leaves about a $4.5 million budget gap. And so that budget gap has to be filled either through local general fund contributions, through a millage, or through contracts for services, whatever that may look like, but most likely a millage, like most transit authorities are funded through.
Sure. And part of the proposal included potentially even 2 millages, one for the city and then another for the county, which I presume city residents would be expected to pay, considering we pay all county
No,
millages as it is.
So the study recommended a couple of different scenarios. One of those scenarios was the creation of 2 separate authorities. Nobody is talking about that option. So in order to levy 2 separate millages, you would have to have 2 separate authorities. The only way to have 2 separate authorities under Public Act 196 would require an act of state legislature. So Kalamazoo made it happen. They were able to get Public Act 196 amended in 2016, and that amendment is very specific to allow that only for areas of population like 230,000 to 255,000. Counties that don't fit in that can only have 1 authority, and therefore you can only levy 1 millage.
Oh, we're pretty close to 230, right?
No, the county is close to like
Oh, you're
135.
right, 130, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep. So to get something like that done, you're looking at probably 5 to 7 years to get an amendment to Public Act 196.
Sure.
And so, no, that is not the proposal currently, is not 2 separate millage rates. It is it would be 1 millage rate, 1 authority operating service.
Okay.
And then your second question to that is what percentage of revenue will come from Battle Creek? Could you clarify that question?
Typical millages throughout the countywide millages, Battle Creek accounts for like 38-40% of the revenue. I assume under these circumstances where we, again, assume there's going to be 1 TAC, that it would be in line with that as well, too. So
Yep,
Battle
the
Creek's going to be
proportion.
38, 40% of the
Correct.
revenue.
Although, Commissioner, if I could just interject there real quick too, that would ultimately depend on who opts in and who opts
Oh,
out,
sure.
right? So, I mean, I think if you equate that percentage, you have to assume everybody opted in and everybody was paying.
Yeah, what I'm hoping to illustrate in this line of questioning is Battle Creek is the big fish.
We always
In there.
are.
Yeah,
We're also the largest consumer, right, of the transportation services.
certainly,
Yeah.
right?
The second part of your question is, how long does it last? How long would that millage last for? Public Act 196 is a 5-year limit, so it would be a 5-year millage amount, and it would go for renewal every 5 years if that was the route.
Okay.
Your third question was, are there expected cost savings should we shift to a countywide system? I think one of the things I touched on was the ability to gain efficiencies by operating countywide. We currently have multiple providers operating within silos, all using their own vehicles, their own technologies, all with our own administrative and maintenance staffs. There's opportunities for efficiencies. But as far as like specific cost savings, if you have a specific example you're looking for, or something in particular, I could speak to
No,
that.
I was just curious if it was something that was on the minds of the folks making these calculations.
Yet, really, what's driving this is the need and what we're hearing from the community. The question is, how do we get there,
Sure.
funding-wise, to provide that level of service? Question number 4 is, how will current providers, such as Community Action, be impacted? And so, I think I spoke to that. Chuck even spoke to that when he said Community Action can't meet all of the demand that exists right now. BC Go is another example of there is just far more demand than we can all provide together. All of those services currently exist, and we still are only meeting 22% of the demand within the county. So those services would continue to operate the way that they're operating because they operate niche markets. So like I said, specific to individuals with disabilities, specific to program populations, or specific to, say, seniors. However, they don't operate necessarily at all hours or for all trip purposes. So for example, somebody using Community Action Agency may not be able to take a trip to Firekeepers for a social outing. But within the authority, if they were within the service area, you could do that. And then your last question was, what are our options should we decide to opt out? Opt
At a
out
later date, yeah.
Yes. So the resolution kind of spoke to that a little bit. There's a legal process, so the TAC authority would have to do that, as well as your body would have to decide to opt out via a resolution, and then that would require 2/3 approval by the authority board as well.
Great, thank you. And I certainly have some comments on it too, if I may, Mr. Mayor. That just speaks to the last, the item 5 there, how significant it is that we are not passively enrolled in this thing without a robust, diligent conversation about what exactly it means. Because we're not going to be able to so easily get out of this thing once we're in. And again, they're counting on our revenue, they're counting on our riders. We are, as I said, the big fish in this regard, so we have the most at stake. So, considering that, I want to point out a few things from the study. The transportation study that I happen to be a part of commissioning as a county commissioner. So this number has been said before. I understand it's flexed a little bit because of the CAD situation here, but at the time of the writing of the study, there were 17 existing transit providers. I think that's probably close, that's 16 now. And this is a quote, "The amount of transportation support is a great feature of this community." That's right from the report. The report itself acknowledges we have significant transportation options in the community. Another point, and again, this is a quote, "The county has most of its services and opportunities clustered in 3 urban areas, Battle Creek, Marshall, Albion, and many residents of these communities both live and work there. What that tells me is interjurisdictional trips are relatively low. We have systems where the people are, and most needs are being met." Given that, I would suggest that we, shift our focus more so within the city of Battle Creek instead of paying a little bit more for transit outside of Battle Creek. I have a little bit more. The survey respondents. Now, this transit study, which all this is predicated on, included 115 respondents from the city of Battle Creek. That's 22% of the total. As we just said, we're 38 to 40% of the people, of the revenue coming in. 38%, also, and that amounts to a 38% share of the Calhoun County population. Perhaps we need our own survey to figure out what our own riders are what needs of theirs aren't being met. And I mean, I'll add this as well too. 15% of the respondents in the survey don't live in our county. 15%, almost as many as the residents of the city of Battle Creek that are accounted for in this study, don't even live in Calhoun County to begin with. Of the survey respondents, 79% rarely to never use public transit, and 87% use it less than once. This is table A2 in the study. So we asked a bunch of people, it sounds like, that don't use public transportation, how they feel about public transportation. Further, we asked a lot of folks who don't live here how they felt about our public transportation. And, more so, we asked not enough people in the city of Battle Creek about it. So, these are just nails in the coffin for this thing to me. Survey respondents, priority for transit, average score was 3. This is table A8, which is a neutral. A neutral response doesn't lead me to believe that there's a resounding call for major structural change to transportation in our community. If we saw a bunch of 5s, urgent needs for folks to get out of the city, that I might be more open to that, but it just wasn't there. So what do folks do want? Survey respondents, this is table A14, service preferences for the residents of Battle Creek and Springfield. So this is 120 people. So there are 5 people from Springfield. They want same-day ride requests, discounted price options, longer evening hours. Nobody went out of their way to submit a card during this study, a memo, an email, a contact, a letter, anything to say, gosh, I wish I could use Battle Creek Transit to get to Albion, or Battle Creek Transit to get down to Homer Township. It's just, the information isn't there. Key takeaways from the survey respondents. Majority of respondents currently use personal vehicles to get around the county, and their responses indicate they're likely to continue to do so. So not only did we ask all these questions of this variety of people that happen to be the exact opposite of what we're looking for, the people we asked aren't going to change their behavior based on a countywide transit authority being in place. And this is right from the survey. Survey respondents, yeah, I mean, I could go on. It's been a long night as it is, but I just want to say, with all this taken into account, I don't think it's unfair to say that the data, the survey, the study, this whole transit study, everything that this is predicated on isn't sufficient for this board to act in the interest of our citizens, especially when we're going to be footing 40% up, nearly 40% of the bill for it all. When our constituents speak to us, it's clear they want more BC Go. They want more BC Transit options with better BC Transit fares. They want solutions here from us, not necessarily an ambiguous TAC commission of appointees from who knows where. I don't even know if is it going to be 7 members? Is it going to be 30? How many are going to be from Battle Creek? How many are going to be concerned about my constituents getting from, La Vista Boulevard and Old Lakeview down to Meyer or out to the fort to work? I don't think as many of them are going to be considering that as they're going to say, gosh, how can we get folks from Battle Creek to Marshall? And that's just, that we can't overlook that. Yeah, I have more notes, but I just can't emphasize enough. I don't believe this is right for us. I don't believe this is right for our people at this time, and I would encourage you all to opt out while we still can, because this is the only time we're going to be able to do it unconditionally, as was mentioned. It's going to take not only basically an act of Congress, which I heard was just 2 super majorities of the TAC board and this board to get out later. And, our residents are going to be paying for it, and I don't know that they're going to get better service out of it. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments at this time? Commissioner Morris and Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mayor. After sitting on the Public Transportation Committee and recently going through some fare updates, we have received a lot of response from our citizens about what they need to see in our community. And although I understand where you're coming from with we don't want to service other entities, this seems to be necessary for us to sustain our busing system. Mallory comes in all the time and gives her presentations and talks about how she gets funding and goes out after the grants to do that. So if we opt out of this and we exclude ourselves from receiving grants, I don't see our bus system being able to sustain itself longer, and I think that we would have to increase fares even more than we already have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Donnell?
I know it said that we couldn't opt out unless it was a city vote or the 2/3 of the transit authority. But is there any way, like, if we found out the millage was too high and unsustainable, there's no way of getting out of that also? Because we don't know what this board is yet. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So the millage goes to the people
Okay.
to vote. So we're looking at potentially August of 2024 is when a millage, and that ballot language is due in May of 2024. And so we would have an amount at that point of what that millage rate would be, and then the people would have the opportunity to either approve it or defeat it.
Would it just, well, I know this sounds like a silly question, but it will. The citizens of Battle Creek would be voting with the whole entire county, though, for the whole millage, so it would be the whole county voting on it, not just a regional vote for that millage, correct? If we are in the transit authority.
It would be the jurisdictional boundaries of the transit authority that would have it on their ballot.
Okay.
So if an area opted out of the transit authority, then it would not be presented to their voters to vote.
One of the most important the things about this is the funding. From what I understand is that we would lose out like on federal funds or other funds because we would, if we were not in the system and the county decides to do, they haven't decided yet to do the transit authority, correct?
Correct, it's on their agenda for May 4th.
Okay. It
Thursday.
just seems like we're putting the cart before the horse here in this kind of situation where we don't know what we're getting into, but then can't get out later. And that's the truth, right? We can't postpone this. Well, we have to vote on it before June 5th.
Correct. You have 30 days after the creation of the authority to be able to opt out. The authority is the one who has to put the ballot language on the ballot.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Okay.
I guess I need a point of clarification because I'm hearing, if we vote tonight to opt in, we're stuck, we have to do all these things, but I also heard a June 5th date and they're going to create an authority date. So I'm really confused on when we can say, so as my understanding is, we actually have until June 5th to get out of this without having a supermajority, whatever. A simple 5-4 vote gets us out.
Correct.
That's what I was, yeah, that's what I was getting.
We don't
to.
need a supermajority.
No.
Correct.
Right.
If-
So
if
if we
you
vote
act by
yes
June
tonight
6th.
to opt in, we still have until June 5th to vote out, and we don't need anybody's permission except these members on this board, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
If I could offer clarification, I've got it in the resolution. So Commissioner Commissioner Smith asked that it be on tonight's agenda. And what I have indicated in the resolution is that if you vote yes on this, you're still going to have to do another resolution to actually opt out since the Articles of Incorporation haven't been approved yet. So that would actually, unless there were a special meeting, if the decision, so if you vote yes tonight, then you'd have to vote again, and it would have to be at the second meeting.
Right, and I imagine if we voted yes tonight, we're gonna know a lot more of what this thing's gonna look like after, I assume the county's gonna vote yes on it, because now they have their big fish in the game. And then, we're gonna know a lot more, because I agree with Commissioner Smith, I don't want to be fronting the bill for the county. We represent the city of Battle Creek, but I also don't want to vote against something that I haven't seen in its entirety. And we got something called the Blue Oval coming in. And that's something that we have no idea what's going to do to our community. And the transportation to employers and employees and what have you, it seems like a giant mess. So I'm going to vote yes on this, but I just, again, for clarification, June 5th, we get to vote no if we don't like what we see from it.
Okay, I think, so if you vote yes tonight, that says we intend to opt out.
I'm sorry, I'm going to
So
vote
you-
no on this.
If you vote no, right.
Yeah.
That there still could be a resolution on at the meeting, the next meeting in 2 weeks
That I can opt out.
to opt out, yeah.
Thank you.
And that's what I was, trying to go at here, was one of these dates were actually, because it seems like they haven't even had it yet, and we're discussing it tonight is really what we're trying to do, is get information out there to citizens so we can get more feedback, like on the surveys. And how was the survey taken? Was it through the water bill system, or was there an invitation to go online for Commissioner Smith's survey numbers that he was coming from?
So the consultants did a few things. They attended different Calhoun County events. So for example, they set up a booth at the fair. the Calhoun County Fair. They attended some other local community events, senior events, and things like that to get their respondents. There was also, you were able to take it online. I know some of the county commissioners at the time had shared the link and such, but that was the primary way that they were collecting data.
Okay.
Was through survey.
It seemed like there wasn't a lot of participation yet in the survey from the numbers that I heard. And find a way to boost those up. But no, I really am happy with the discussion that we're having. And it's hard because if we opt out of it and then later we don't have a chance to get our funding, that's really one of the hard parts of it. So I'll be voting to stay in it right now we're going to put it on the commission then in June, our next commission meeting. Or would that be past the date?
That would be past the date. The next meeting isn't until June 6th. The deadline is June 5th.
So we would have
So
to
you
have
would
it
have
on
to
our
do it at
next
the
meeting
May
to actually
16th.
finalize the vote. So it's almost like we're announcing or putting up like a, like we, how do they say this, like introducing an ordinance tonight, almost
Yeah,
like.
if you take no action, so if you do not opt out, then you are presumably in. The only action that is required is to opt out.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Lance and Commissioner O'Donnell. Any other, Commissioner Simmons, and Commissioner Ballard?
So, Mallory, thank you for your work on this. And I remember from my previous term on the commission from 2017 to 2020, the initial discussions about this. And that's all I remember. Then COVID hit and it kind of just fell by the wayside. I've been out for a couple of years. And one of the reasons that I co-sponsored this when Commissioner Smith brought this up was, you mentioned, here's the path that we followed. I haven't been part of that path. You see 3 new commissioners that sponsored this, like, we don't know what's going on. And it seems like there's still a lot of questions. I famously remember the statement by former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, you have to vote for the bill to find out what's in it. And that's what I feel is happening here. We have to opt in to find out what we're going to get. And there are just so many questions for me. And I could keep you for an hour tonight and ask all my questions. And maybe, you know, we've sat down one-on-one before, and I used to drag my kids out to ride the bus on different routes just to check it out, just to get a feel for it. And we run a robust, a well-run operation that's a robust service for the citizens of Battle Creek. And I hate to jeopardize that by turning that over to the unknown. Can you tell me how this board is even going to be comprised? Or what, I know Battle Creek will have, each of the municipalities that opt in by default would have representation on the board. Can you tell me how that's set up?
Yeah, so as is written right now, the Articles of Incorporation include 7 seats, and that's the 4 cities, a county, and then 2 townships or villages, essentially at large, that are within the jurisdictional boundaries. So again, only those individuals who are part of the authority, who participate in the authority, have a seat on the board.
So we would only have 1 seat?
As the
City of
articles
Battle-
are written right now, yes, the articles
Okay.
would be amended every time
So,
somebody opts in or opts out
A
of
little
the
bit of a
authority.
problem with that because we, as been mentioned, there would be 38–40% of this that we wouldn't have. I'm not saying that we need to have a supermajority on the board or anything because we're bringing the most to the table, but 1 seat out of 7 certainly is not proportional to the citizens of the city of Battle Creek. You've also talked about the funding. We get a fair amount of federal and state funding, but we also subsidize transit considerably with our general fund. Can you tell me how much that is?
Yeah, so you will see at the workshop coming up, it's just over $1 million every year
Okay.
that the city contributes out of the general fund. And we know that transit, you were part of the conversations in 2019 when I first started,
Yes.
that we were headed down an unsustainable path.
Correct.
COVID kind of threw us a life raft there because we had increased federal funding that was eligible at 100%. Normally, our funding's only eligible at 50% reimbursement. And so for the last 3 years, we've been able to operate our existing services using those dollars.
The ARPA funds.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yep, we had like CARES Act, ARPA.
Sure.
And then now we've exhausted those funds. We're back to our regular 50% funding levels, and the rest is a subsidy
Okay.
from
So
the city's general
the
fund.
general fund that we're chipping in, this is our taxpayers through property tax, income tax, $1 million. where does that go if this transportation authority takes over? Because if we're also going to be asked to pay an operating millage for, and in the models that I've seen, the good, better, best, they all have millages attached.
Yep.
Okay, so our citizens are paying property tax now and income tax, and that's subsidizing through the general fund contribution to the transit. Where does that general fund money go?
Ultimately, that would be reflected in the corresponding budget that following year that is approved by this commission. So,
Okay, but if we go into the transportation authority and they take control of all transit in the county, where does our general fund, does we just retain that then? And they're, hey, okay, transportation
Yeah,
authority,
so-
you're on your own now.
yeah, so that 1.1 million that we get is just an allocation out of the general fund. That money would go back into the general fund that the commission approves the budget of.
Okay, so we would not continue to be kicking a subsidy in from our general fund to this transportation authority, from how you've seen it
Correct.
in the draft.
Correct. So as proposed and as we've discussed and planned, that full gap was covered through a millage. It wasn't covered through additional contracts for services or additional contributions from participating general funds.
Okay. And then as far as the vote, I think Commissioner O'Donnell asked this, that the vote wouldn't be just for our municipality to approve the millage or not. We would be lumped in with everyone in the county. So if my understanding is correctly, we're 50,000 residents in the city of Battle Creek roughly, and 130 plus in the county. So our residents could theoretically vote no for this, but we would still get this imposed on us by the rest of the residents of the county.
So it would only those jurisdictions that opt in would have the opportunity to vote.
Okay, in my hypothetical, I'm saying the
The
whole
whole
county
county,
opts in.
correct.
Okay.
Yep,
But
and-
in my hypothetical, the citizens of the city could say, no, we like our robust transportation system. We don't want to do this millage. We don't want, and by the way, what you're trying to accomplish with this thing is, I like it, okay? But I don't think we necessarily need another layer of government to administer this. And we've heard a lot of mention about the Blue Oval, Firekeepers Casino, people that need to get to work out there. What kind of engagement are we doing with these employers? Like the state of Michigan, they're pushing this Blue Oval thing. They're throwing all this money in. Why aren't they saying, yeah, we want your people to be able to get to work there? Same question about housing we've talked about here. State of Michigan, you're pushing this. Where are all these people going to live? So again, there's just a lot of variables there. I hear probably the number one call that I get, well, aside from snow plowing and garbage pickup, it's when I talk to people, yeah, I'm your city commissioner. Yeah, the taxes are too high in the city. And I'm just really concerned about that. Acknowledging the fact that there's that need, Chuck, you addressed the need well. Is there another, in this whole discussion, has there been a model proposed that, hey, City of Battle Creek, you're doing great. You've got this robust system. We want to opt into your system and provide this. We'll pay our millage. We'll kick in with our general fund. Has that been an option at all?
Those conversations have been had. The participation hasn't been there. When we look at our neighboring communities that border us and could benefit from service, there hasn't been contribution coming
So
from
they're
those
not
areas.
willing to kick in any of their own general
From
fund,
general
but they might be willing to join an authority that then levies tax on all of us.
Potentially, yes.
I don't have any other questions at this moment. I still have a lot of questions, but I don't want to monopolize all the time. It's just too much for me to absorb in such a short period of time.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Commissioner Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. So if I heard you correctly, Mallory, and thank you for calling me back and offering to let me ride around on the buses, because I will take you up on that. I've just been out of town a little bit. Couple points. I want to make sure that the citizens and residents of Battle Creek, because we always talk about how much it costs to ride the bus, but yet in the history I think I read, they're only paying 7% of what that cost is. Do they realize what the other 93% are coming from? And will we be losing that other 93% of funding if we go with this?
That potential stands, yes.
Okay. And then secondly, to support somebody that always wants money being returned to the citizens, which I don't disagree, this $1.1 million or whatever that's going to go back into the general fund, are we going to lower our millage so that that actually goes back to the citizens or residents?
I can't
I know you
speak, yeah,
can't.
I can't
It's
speak to that.
rhetorical.
I would
Great
just
question.
remind you, yeah, the commission approves that. budget.
Support.
Okay, we're going to go, thank you, Commissioner Ballard, Commissioner Smith, and Vice Mayor Sophia.
Be very brief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would strongly urge my colleagues who are concerned about the funding element and the loss of funding to consider the fact that if, as somebody once said, if the big fish opts out, it's unlikely this thing is even going to happen. I'm already aware of townships opting out. I mean, all these mills that we were considering hovered around at least one. Most of them, or at least two cases, were above one, and that's going to devastate farmers in the rural area. They're simply not going to vote for it. So I don't think our funding is at risk if we decide to opt out of this, simply because it's not going to move forward if we opt out of this. And further, you know, the TAC deadline, that, you know, June 6th or whatever, that sounds great, you know, on its face value. But if I were running a TAC and I wanted to make sure that I had as much authority as possible and as much funding as possible, I would allow the city to passively being enrolled and then not do anything until June 7th. And this is just, we are exposed. There's a tremendous amount of risk here, and it's not being directed by the citizens of Battle Creek. It's, you know, all this stuff outside of our jurisdiction. Our voters are looking to us. They're going to ask us where we were, what our position was when taxes went up, and, you know, things didn't really change, but they see, you know, wave after wave of, you know, bus heading down to Blue Oval, who already got $2 billion, by the way. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that, but I would really strongly urge you to reconsider that stance. I think we should opt out. And opting out now is going to be a heck of a lot easier than opting out anytime after June 6th. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Vice Mayor Sophia.
Thank you. Mallory, so you said that there are 5 neighboring counties that have county-wide transit systems. How do they fund?
Most all transit systems in the state of Michigan are authorities. Very few operate as municipal departments.
Okay, and they're all funded through a local millage?
Yes, the majority of those are funded through local millage.
And how do their millage rates compare with the millage rates that are being proposed in this good, better, best?
So I don't have those millage rates in front of me right now. When we were talking about our fare increase back in 2019, I think, for the first time, we compared ourselves to Holland, Grand Haven, Bay City, even Kalamazoo, just because of their regional area, and Jackson. They were all supported by a millage that was at or near at least 1 mill.
Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit, and my apologies for dragging the meeting on, but I'd like to talk for a little bit about kind of the opt-in versus the opt-out and what happens. So first of all, I understand that a millage would go on the ballot. So if the residents of Battle Creek vote no, would that opt us out? Or is it based on the county-wide, everybody that votes, it's based on those totals?
Correct. It's
So-
based on that jurisdictional either pass or fail of the authority boundaries.
Okay, all right. So I guess I'm hesitant to opt out of something that I don't know. It just seems a little premature. Can you tell me what other agencies or entities in the county are opting out or have opted out already?
So at last count, I know Taconcha, Lee, Sheridan, Albion Township, I believe Homer, mostly very rural areas. I don't believe any of the larger, Emmett Township, for example, Penfield, I believe has already sent their letter in that they have opted in. Bedford, I don't believe has officially met yet. And then the city of Marshall, I don't believe has formally met yet.
Okay, and then if a jurisdiction opts out, that precludes just the residents from accessing that? Or does that mean that if Marshall opts in and they want to come from Marshall to Battle Creek for dialysis and Battle Creek opts out, that's a no-go for them?
Yeah, so traditionally, in transit authorities, those boundaries are pretty tight. And it's because those boundaries are created and funded through a millage. And so your residents are paying for service, no other residents benefit from it. Now, obviously, that authority board could choose to do something different. So I'm going to use Emmett Township as an example. Let's say if Emmett Township were to opt out, we have major shopping centers in Emmett Township, and that authority board would have to decide, do we want to continue to serve those major shopping centers, but not serve the residents of Emmett Township? Or do we want to say, this is the boundary line and you'll have to walk to get to those major shopping centers?
So to be determined.
Correct.
Okay. I may be in touch with some additional questions in the future, particularly depending on how the vote goes tonight, but I appreciate the information that you've provided. Thank you.
Your Honor, may I offer something quickly? So, because the Articles of Incorporation have not been approved yet by the county, nobody really has formally opted out. I think they've just, like you would do tonight, potentially, they're expressing that's what their intent is. They would have to do that after that fact. Somebody else said something about June 6th. It's June 5th. Somebody else asked about, why don't we wait till June 7th? You know, why are we letting them tell us 30 days? So it's actually in the state statute that it's 30 days. Now, and then one other thing, so if we were to not opt out in this 30 days, and then there would have to be a resolution by the commission to withdraw, and then a 2/3 vote by the members on the Transportation Authorities Board, excluding the member from the community that wants to withdraw. So we would be out. There is another option other than that, and that is, that's a vote. So notwithstanding that, an entity that's a political subdivision and a member of this authority may be released from membership in the public authority if all the conditions are met. So it would go to the voters. And I mean, there's a timing thing related to voting at a November election, general or special, November before the expiration of a tax authorized to be levied under the act. So that is another option, that it would go to the voters of the city of Battle Creek if we were in it and then subsequently decided we wanted out. But just know that the timing of that is specific.
Can we move our meeting from June 6th to June 5th, or is that, or we're not able to?
It would be a,
We have another meeting in May, right?
well, it wouldn't have to be a special meeting. They could vote to amend the meeting schedule because you wouldn't want to meet on Monday the 5th and Tuesday the 6th. So you could vote to move the first meeting in June to Monday the 5th.
I mean, and
Have
again,
lots of.
and look, I think, I totally agree with a lot of you guys are saying. There's no way would I opt in something and leave it up to the other jurisdictions to get us out after we're in. Right? Sorry, I don't trust them enough. But we got to see, and Mallory, I don't know, I think you're hearing it. You need to go back to that commission and you tell them, if we're going to be in here to have any chance of us not opting out, we better have a big piece of the pie at the table, not just one vote.
Okay, so, but for purposes of us opting out, it doesn't matter how many seats we have because we're excluded in that.
I get that part, but what I'm saying is if we deny the vote to opt out tonight, we're going to have, I would like to have an opportunity to opt out on June 5th if I don't like what, well, at least I'll probably change my mind.
Are we ready
I
to
don't wanna
vote?
see what we're-
No.
No, I'd say it.
All right. I got to be honest with
Really
you.
important discussion.
Mr. Smith, we've spoken twice on this. You've been very passionate. The hour's getting late. We've got further business to do. And I'm not trying to be hard on you or anything, but there's people that haven't even spoken to this. So, Commissioner Ballard.
I'm all set.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote? Please vote on Resolution 131.
Just to clarify,
Yeah,
the vote
for the
is,
clerk.
yes vote would be to opt out, correct?
Correct. A
Correct.
yes vote would be opting out.
Opt out, and then a no vote would be to,
But you would still have to do,
Passively enrolled regardless.
Right.
If we don't opt, we're in unless we opt out.
If
We're
the,
stuck.
if the authority is created on Thursday by the board, that starts the 30-day clock. So
So would
we
we
don't have to take any action, except there is this resolution. And how it's worded is, a yes means the city of Battle Creek opts out.
and that you would have another vote after Thursday to officially opt out, because you can't opt out until the Articles of Incorporation have been passed.
We'll be revisiting this, of course.
I don't think, I mean, nothing's going to change, though, between now and June, the deadline. We're not going to,
You're going to know which municipalities are in and out, is what you're going to know by the June 5th.
And if we have.
we could decide where we are tonight, though, because if we hang
All
on
right.
too long, we're going to be enrolled in and we won't be able to get out.
We've called for the vote. Madam Clerk, has everyone voted?
No.
No.
Motion has been defeated.